When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say. Because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. They say your 10th birthday is the one you remember. Double digits. You feel older, like the world might start taking you seriously. And for me, it was supposed to be the best one yet. The morning air carried a soft chill, the kind that whispers of rain but holds back the storm. My mother called it birthday weather, quiet, kind, and full of promise. She believed every birthday came with its own mood, and that day, the sky was a pale blue, dusted with thin white clouds that looked like torn paper. She stood in the kitchen humming to herself, pouring tea, wearing her favorite beige cardigan over a dress that danced with little sunflowers. She looked like the kind of happiness you think will last forever. I watched her from the doorway, socked feet curled against the floor tiles. She smiled when she saw me. "You're getting too tall for that pajama set," she said, placing a kiss on my forehead. "But you'll always be my baby." I grinned, pretended to protest, but inside, I liked it. I liked how safe it felt to belong to her. We had a plan, just the two of us. Dad was at work, a long shift, as usual, and Mom promised we'd go out together to choose the cake. Not order it like every year, not some grown-up delivery. She wanted it to be an adventure. "Today," she whispered, "we walk, we laugh, and we pick the happiest cake in the city." We left the house around 9 p.m. Our neighborhood felt gentle that day. The houses looked warmer. The trees swayed like they were dancing just for us. We passed the little bookstore with the creaky door, and I peeked through the window like I always did. Next to it was the man with the violin. He played there every morning, wrinkled face tucked into his scarf, bow gliding with the wind. Mom dropped a coin into his cup and told him it was my birthday. He played the happy birthday tune. I blushed and looked at the sidewalk. Mom laughed. Her laugh was full and bright, like church bells on a lazy Sunday. That's when I saw it. Across the street, just beyond the bakery, stood a cart, a pop-up toy stand, its wheels crooked, the whole thing leaning like it might tip over, but it sparkled with color. Balloons bobbed in the air, plastic swords, wind-up dinosaurs. A row of bright yo-yos lined up like candy, and right in the center, a red yo-yo shaped like a skull. Its eyes glowed gold in the sunlight. I pointed, tugged her sleeve. "Just real quick. Mom, please?" She hesitated, glanced at the traffic, then nodded. "Okay, but stay close." She held my hand tighter, but as we got closer, I got faster. Just a few feet ahead, just a few steps. I don't even remember letting go. I just remember the sound of her voice. "Wait, no!" It came sharp, like the snap of a thread in a quiet room. I turned. She wasn't beside me anymore. She was behind me, running. And then, the car, it didn't make the noise I expected. No screech, no warning, just a brutal, sudden thud that silenced the world. I saw her arms reach. I saw her face twist, not in fear for herself, but for me. And then her body hit the hood, rolled, collapsed. Right there, in front of me. I screamed, but I didn't hear it. It felt like screaming underwater. People rushed in. Someone held me back. I kicked. I scratched. My hands bled. My throat burned. But she didn't move. Her dress stained. Her hair spread like ink. They told me I passed out. I woke up in a hospital hallway, fluorescent lights. A nurse wrapped a blanket around me. Even though I wasn't cold, I stared at my palms, tiny red scratches, but no real blood, nothing that made sense. I asked where she was. No one answered. That's when I knew. That was the moment guilt first slid into my body. It didn't come screaming. It came quiet, like fog under a door. I didn't know what to call it, but I knew it had settled inside me, and it wouldn't be leaving. When Dad arrived, his face looked broken, like someone had scooped the soul out of him and left only skin. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't shout. He just held me and cried. Not the kind of cry that sounds like grief. It was deeper, raw, like a bone splitting from the inside out. I didn't cry. I didn't think I was allowed to. I just whispered. I let go. Over and over. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in her bed, curled up in the cardigan she wore that morning. It still smelled like lavender and cinnamon. I pressed my face into the fabric and whispered again. I let go. It became my lullaby. We didn't touch the cake. It sat in the fridge like a corpse. White frosting, blue candles. I used to love chocolate filling, but now, every time I opened the fridge, I gagged. It became a monument to a happiness I destroyed. My father didn't throw it out either. We both kept pretending we didn't see it, as if acknowledging it would confirm everything. The funeral came too soon, too quiet, too polished. I wore a black jacket that was too big. It swallowed me. People hugged me, called me brave, said she was in a better place. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to tell them what I did, that she died because I wanted a skull-shaped toy, but I didn't. I stood there, next to my dad, silent as the coffin lowered. I remember the dirt. It hit like thunder, and with every drop, something inside me shrank. At 10 years old, I made a vow. I would never celebrate my birthday again. The dream started that same week. She stood in my room, wearing the cardigan, her face calm. She didn't speak. She just stared, like she was trying to remember who I was. I reached out, but she turned and disappeared into the wall. I woke up with blood in my mouth. I had bitten my tongue clean through. That was the first time guilt followed me into sleep. People think trauma is loud. Mine was quiet, like a moth chewing holes in silk. Slow, secret. I stopped talking. I stopped playing. When my father worked late, I hid in her closet. Wrapped myself in her scarves. Read her old books, though I didn't understand most of them. Sometimes I'd write letters to her. I'm sorry. I miss you. I'll never let go again. But she never wrote back. They asked if I wanted therapy. I said no. My father begged. I just shook my head. What would I say? Hi, I killed my mother with a birthday wish. There's no handbook for that. Instead, I built a museum in my mind. Each memory sealed in glass. Each guilt-laced moment cataloged. Each breath a quiet apology. I didn't celebrate my 11th birthday, or the 12th, or the 13th. But every year on that day, I felt it again. The sun through the trees, the violin music, the flash of red plastic, and her voice, "Wait, no!" Then silence, always silence. They say grief comes in waves, but for me, it was more like a silence. Heavy, still, suffocating. There was no music at the funeral, only footsteps, only whispers, only the sound of dirt being shoveled into a hole too small for a universe like hers. I was 10 years old, dressed in black. The suit didn't fit. Nothing did anymore. My mother's body was inside that box, but I couldn't believe it. The woman who had tucked me in the night before, gone. Just like that. They called it an accident. But I knew better. I let go of her hand, and now she was dead. The funeral was held 3 days after her death, a church my mother never really liked. Too cold, she would have said, too formal. Still, people came, friends, distant relatives, neighbors with casseroles and empty eyes. They brought flowers that smelled too sweet, too artificial. They said things I didn't understand. She's in a better place. At least she didn't suffer. She died a hero. I wanted to scream. Not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't. No one said it was my fault. No one looked me in the eye and blamed me. But I could feel it, a weight pressing down, silent and invisible, especially from my father. He stood next to me during the service, still as stone, one hand on my shoulder, not squeezing, just resting. It didn't feel like comfort. It felt like obligation. I looked up at him once. His eyes were hollow, like someone had reached in and taken out all the light. I'd never seen a man look like that, like a statue carved from sorrow. He didn't cry that day, not in front of me. When they lowered the casket into the ground, I felt something inside me go with it, a piece of warmth, of safety, of home. Gone. I didn't speak, not during the prayers, not during the eulogies, not even when they asked me if I wanted to say something. I did. God, I did. But the words were stuck behind a dam of guilt. So I just stared at the dirt and imagined her under it. That night, the house was too quiet. My birthday cake still sat in the fridge. The frosting had gone hard, the candles untouched. I opened the fridge, stared at it, then closed the door. I wanted to throw it away, but something stopped me, like tossing it would make her death more real, like keeping it was a way to pretend none of it happened. I went to bed in her cardigan. It still smelled like her, lavender, shampoo, a hint of flour. I wrapped myself in it like armor, and I waited for sleep, but sleep didn't come. Only shadows, and then, eventually, dreams, horrible ones. In the first dream, she was calling to me, but I couldn't reach her. She stood on the other side of a street, the same street. "Come back," I screamed. She smiled, shook her head slowly, and stepped backward into the road. The sound of tires, the crack of bone. I woke up screaming. Sweat soaked through the sheets. My mouth tasted like metal. I'd bitten my lip again. That became routine, nightmares, silent breakfasts. A father who barely looked at me. I started talking to her, whispering to her cardigan at night, pretending she was still listening. "I'm sorry, Mom. Please come back. I won't ever let go again." The house didn't respond. At school, I stopped answering questions, stopped playing at recess. Kids gave up trying to talk to me. Teachers started sending home notes, but my father never said a word. He worked later than ever. Sometimes he didn't come home until midnight. Once, I heard him crying in the garage, a deep, ugly cry, the kind that sounds like it's being ripped from your spine. I didn't go to him. I just curled up in my mother's closet, wrapped in her old coat, and cried too. The worst part wasn't the grief, it was the guilt. It gnawed at me, not like a sharp pain, but like a dull, endless chew, a rat inside my soul. Every time I saw a mother with her child, I wanted to run away. Every time I heard laughter, I wanted to scream. How could the world still spin? How could people still smile? She was dead, and I was the reason. One afternoon, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I didn't recognize the boy staring back. Sunken eyes, pale skin. I leaned closer and whispered to the mirror, "You don't deserve to be alive." Then I smashed it with my fist. Blood everywhere. My father took me to the ER. I told them it was an accident. They believed me. He didn't say much on the ride home, but as we pulled into the driveway, he finally spoke. Just one sentence. "I miss her too, you know." Then he turned off the engine. We sat there in the dark, unmoving. And for the first time since the funeral, I reached for his hand. He let me, but it didn't feel like healing. It felt like two ghosts trying to remember how to be alive. From then on, I kept a journal. I called it The Book of the Boy Who Killed His Mother. Every entry began the same way. "Dear Mom, I don't know what I hope to accomplish. Maybe if I wrote enough, I could bring her back, or at least feel closer. But the more I wrote, the more I realized something terrifying. I was forgetting her voice, not her face, that was burned into me, but her laugh, her singing while cooking, the way she said my name. It was all slipping. I became obsessed with remembering every detail, every conversation, every moment. But memories fade, no matter how tightly you grip them. And the tighter I held on, the more they bled through my fingers. One day I stood in her room, held her favorite book, pressed my face into her pillow, and I finally understood. She wasn't coming back. Not in dreams, not in prayers, not in whispers. She was gone, forever. And that was the moment something inside me hardened, like stone setting. I was no longer just a boy. I was a boy with a ghost, and ghosts don't play, they haunt. The house hadn't changed, but everything inside it had. The furniture still sat where she'd left it. The framed photos still lined the hallway. The smell of lavender still lingered faintly in the corners. And yet, without her voice, it was no longer a home. It was just a structure made of walls and echoes, an imitation of warmth, a hollow shell. At first, I tried to pretend she was just away, that any moment, I'd hear her call out from the kitchen, her usual sing-song, "Dinner's ready," that I'd walk in and see her wiping her hands on a dish towel, humming some tune I never recognized. But the silence answered instead. It crept into everything. The clink of a spoon against a bowl became unbearable. The sound of my own footsteps in the hallway made me flinch. Even the wind outside the window felt louder, like the world had turned up its volume to compensate for what was missing. My father and I ate meals in silence. Not because we had nothing to say, but because neither of us knew how to say anything that didn't tremble. The first night he tried to cook, he burned the rice. He swore under his breath and threw the pot in the sink, hands shaking. I offered to eat it anyway. He just shook his head and ordered pizza. We never tried again. There were no more Sunday pancakes, no more small surprises in my lunchbox, no more warm hands brushing my hair out of my eyes as I read on the couch. These little things, once invisible in their regularity, now stood out like holes in a torn cloth. I hadn't known they were the threads holding everything together. The holidays came like ghosts. Thanksgiving was just 2 paper plates and microwave leftovers. Christmas was a silent tree without ornaments. No carols, no presents, just 2 shadows staring into a fire that refused to warm. I began writing more, not because I wanted to, because I had to. The journal became my confession booth. My therapist, my only witness. I hid it under my bed, wrapped in a shoebox. Inside, every page began the same way. Dear Mom, December 14th. Dear Mom, today was the first snow. You used to make hot chocolate when it snowed. I tried to make some, but I burned the milk. The house smelled like smoke. It reminded me of the night you died. I didn't go outside. I don't like snow anymore. I miss you, and I think I deserve to. January 3rd. Dear Mom, Dad forgot my dentist appointment. I didn't remind him. I don't think he'd notice anyway. He works all the time now, comes home late, smells like oil and coffee. Sometimes I think he blames me, but not out loud. He's too tired to hate me properly, so I do it for him. I hate me enough for both of us. I began calling myself the punished child in those pages, as if writing it enough times might make it true or make it fair. I believed deep down that I was supposed to suffer, that surviving was a mistake I had to pay for. I stopped turning on the lights. The darkness felt honest. It didn't pretend. When I came home from school, I'd go straight to my room, sit on the floor, listen to the house breathe. There were days I didn't even open my mouth. Didn't need to. No one was listening. My father noticed less and less, or maybe he noticed and didn't know what to do with it. He'd ask if I was okay in the same tone someone asks if you've seen their car keys. Yeah, I'd lie. Fine. Then he'd nod and go back to whatever kept him away from the living room. Once, I found him in the garage, sitting on an old paint bucket, staring at the wall, not crying, not thinking, just suspended. I stood there a while, watching him, waiting for him to say something. Maybe. I miss her too, but he didn't even see me. We were two people living in the same house, orbiting the same grief, but never touching. One morning, I poured cereal into a bowl and stared at it. No milk. Just dry flakes and cold porcelain. That's when I broke. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just slowly tipped the bowl over, let the flakes scatter across the floor like ashes. And I whispered, I don't want to be here anymore. Not in that moment, not in that house, not in that skin. I started skipping school, hiding in the park, sitting on the same bench for hours, watching squirrels fight over crumbs. No one came looking, no one called. I was invisible. Maybe I always had been. Maybe Mom had been the only one who really saw me, and now she was gone. Once, I stayed out until dark. When I finally came home, my father just looked at me. You eat? He asked. I shook my head. He sighed, turned back to the TV, and said, There's some soup in the fridge. That was it. No anger, no fear, no questions. Just the quiet acknowledgement that the house was crumbling, and neither of us knew how to stop it. That night I wrote March the 2nd. Dear Mom, I think the house hates me. It creaks more when I walk. The windows fog up and never clear. It's like it's crying when I can't. I think Dad hates me too, but in a quiet way, the way you hate weeds. You don't scream at them. You just ignore them until they die. Sometimes I think I'm a weed. I began to wonder what dying would feel like. Not because I wanted to stop breathing, but because I wanted to know if, wherever you were, you'd be there waiting. Maybe I'd see you again. Maybe I could say sorry, and maybe you'd forgive me. I started sleeping in your room, not in your bed. On the floor beside it, it made me feel close, like the walls remembered you better than I did. Some nights, I'd place your photo beside me and whisper stories, memories, lies, things I wished we had done. And sometimes, I swore I felt the air shift, like you were listening. But even that comfort began to fade. Grief doesn't stay sharp. It dulls. It rots. And soon, the silence in the house didn't feel like mourning. It felt like resignation. April 18th, Dear Mom, I think I've become the wallpaper. I blend in. Nobody notices me unless I peel. Do you think if I screamed, anyone would hear? I don't want to scream, but I don't want to whisper anymore either. Please, just come home. Even if it's just to say goodbye the right way. I didn't write for a while after that. Not because I had nothing left to say, but because I didn't believe anyone was listening, not even the ghosts. It had been 5 years. 5 years since my mother's voice faded from the walls. 5 years since I last held her hand. 5 years since I stopped believing time healed anything. I was 15 now, taller, quieter, more practiced in pretending. The house had changed in small ways. New curtains, a different couch. The smell of old lavender finally replaced by something more sterile, more new, but there were still corners untouched, still shadows where her memory lived. Then came the knock, not on the door, but on the barrier I had built around myself. It was a Sunday. The sky looked like wet cement. I was at the kitchen table, eating toast that tasted like cardboard. Dad cleared his throat. He only ever cleared his throat when he didn't want to say something, which meant something was coming. "I want you to meet someone," he said. I looked up, blank stare, no answer. "She's coming over tonight," he added, and that was it. Like he was announcing a weather report. Nothing urgent, just inevitable. That evening, she arrived, wearing a soft beige dress and a nervous smile. She smelled like chamomile and perfume. Her voice was gentle, careful, like someone walking barefoot over broken glass. "Hello, sweetheart," she said. Sweetheart. The word hit me like a slap. That word belonged to my mother, her voice, her world. This was a stranger wearing a borrowed kindness. I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching her like an animal watches a trap. She tried again. "I've heard so much about you." Her smile trembled slightly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her what exactly she'd heard. That I didn't talk? That I kept a journal full of dead letters to a ghost? That I once went a whole week without saying a single word? Had she heard how I'd watched my mother die for a cake? But I said nothing. I turned around and walked to my room. The sound of my door closing was louder than any argument. Days passed, then weeks. She didn't move in immediately. She came and went like a visitor trying to learn a language she didn't speak. She brought food, complimented my drawings, left books outside my door. Sometimes I found handwritten notes folded neatly under my cereal bowl. "I'm here if you want to talk. You're not alone. I know I'm not your mother. I'm not trying to be." I never replied. Not once. But I read every one and hated her for writing them. My father changed too. He smiled more, laughed again. He shaved regularly, wore cologne. The house started smelling like lemon and fresh laundry instead of grief and memory. I hated that too. There was one night she cooked dinner and invited me to join. I sat at the table, arms crossed. She served me stew, careful and warm. "Your father says you like potatoes," she offered. "I don't," I lied. She blinked. "Oh, I must have." "You're not her," I interrupted. My voice was flat, not cruel, just hollow. She froze. "I know I'm not," she said softly. "Then stop pretending," I snapped. The silence afterward was brutal. Even my father didn't know what to say. He looked down at his plate, ashamed or exhausted. I couldn't tell which. She cleared her throat and stood. "I'll just leave this here," she whispered, and walked away. I didn't touch the food. Later that night, I found another note on my door. "You're allowed to be angry. I won't take that away from you." I tore it in half, not because I hated her, but because it made me feel something, and I wasn't ready to feel anything yet. I began referring to her as the substitute in my journal. The substitute wore my mother's apron today. The substitute rearranged the spice rack. The substitute bought flowers and put them on the windowsill. No matter how kind she was, she remained an intruder in a museum of pain. She dusted shelves that weren't meant to be clean, opened windows that had been shut for a reason, but she kept trying. Even when I snapped, even when I sulked through dinners or stared through her like smoke, she kept trying. She never raised her voice, never demanded affection. She simply existed, quietly, persistently, on the edge of my morning. Then one day, I found her in the living room, sitting in front of the old photo albums. She was crying, not loud sobs, just silent. careful tears, as if afraid they'd disturb the ghosts. I watched from the hallway. She didn't see me. Her fingers hovered over a photo of my mother, smiling, radiant, holding me as a baby. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the picture. "I wish I could have known you." Something cracked in me. Not forgiveness, not understanding, just the first hint of recognition. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was grieving something. Someone she'd never even met, but it didn't change how I felt. Because I still loved my mother, and loving her meant rejecting anyone else who tried to take her place. It was loyalty, or maybe it was fear. Maybe I thought that letting this new woman in meant erasing what little I had left of the one who came before her. I didn't know how to carry both. I didn't know you could love the past and still make space for the present. No one had taught me that. One afternoon, she knocked on my door and asked if we could talk. I didn't answer. "I'll just sit outside, then," she said. And she did. For 20 minutes, she sat on the hallway floor, not saying anything, just being there. When she finally left, I found another note. "You don't have to like me, but I'm not leaving." Somehow, that was more comforting than anything else. Weeks later, I passed her in the hallway. For the first time, I met her eyes. She smiled. Not the bright, sugary kind from before. A sad smile, a tired one, but real. I nodded, just once. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But maybe that was the beginning. Not of love, not of trust, just an acknowledgement that we were two people trying to survive the same man-made storm in the same fragile house, both walking on eggshells around the memory of a woman neither of us would ever stop missing. There's a silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound. It comes from the inside, from somewhere behind the eyes, behind the ribs, a place that stays cold even under the sun. That's where I live now, not in the house, not in my room, but in that cold place inside myself, where words got stuck and light didn't reach. I was 16. My hair had gotten longer, my voice deeper. But inside, everything felt sharper, raw, dangerous. I started breaking things, not always on purpose. Sometimes a plate would slip from my hand, and I wouldn't even flinch when it shattered. Sometimes I'd slam a door so hard the frame cracked. Sometimes I wanted the walls to scream with me. I didn't feel anger. Not exactly. It was more like grief's older, crueler brother. It didn't cry. It destroyed. I began drawing. Not for art, not for school. Just to put something somewhere. My sketches became darker, grotesque. Figures with hollow eyes and twisted mouths. Limbs stretched like shadows. Mothers with faces that bled into smoke. I never showed them to anyone. I kept them in a box under my bed, a gallery of the storm inside me. One evening, I came home late. She was waiting for me, my stepmother, still patient, still trying. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. "Out," I answered, brushing past her. "You missed dinner," she added, following me down the hall. I didn't answer. At my door, she reached out and gently touched my shoulder. It was the first time in weeks she tried, and she said it. "Con, My body went rigid. That word, con, son. It echoed in the hallway like a curse. I turned to her slowly. "Don't," I said. Her face changed, confused, hurt. "What? Don't call me that," I hissed. "But you're not her." She stepped back like I'd struck her. "I know I'm not, but you don't get to say that word," I said. The silence between us became suffocating. "You think saying it makes it real?" I asked. "That you can erase her by calling me that?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm not trying to erase anyone," she whispered. But I wasn't listening anymore. I locked myself in my room, breathing hard. I looked at the box under my bed, pulled out a half-finished sketch. It was a boy. Half of his face was a child's, soft and innocent. The other half was twisted, skull-like, screaming. I stared at it, then grabbed a pencil and gouged the paper, ripping through the image. That night, I heard her crying in the kitchen, a soft, muffled sound, like she didn't want anyone to hear. I didn't feel guilt. Not yet. I felt resentment, that she dared to care, that she wanted a place in something that wasn't hers, that she spoke words my real mother would never get the chance to say again. But guilt is patient. It waits for silence, for reflection. It waits until your anger burns itself out. Then it creeps in, slowly, steadily, like mold in the walls. I started dreaming of my mother again. Not like before, not memories. These dreams were darker. She would stand in the corner of my room, face hidden behind her hair, her dress soaked in rain, silent. Sometimes she'd point at me. Other times, she'd hold her stomach like she was in pain. Once, she opened her mouth and smoke poured out. I woke up gasping. In school, I stopped talking. Teachers stopped calling on me. I didn't eat lunch with anyone. I didn't reply to messages. I sat in the back of class, doodling monsters on the margins of my notebooks. At home, I barely left my room. My stepmother would knock softly each night before bed. "Dinner's ready," she'd say. I never answered. Sometimes she left a plate outside the door. I'd wait until the hallway was quiet before opening it. Cold food, lukewarm comfort. One afternoon, she walked into my room while I was gone. She found the box of sketches. She never told me, but I found them, rearranged slightly, put back with too much care. She'd seen it all, the twisted images, the words scrawled on the backs. "I'm not okay. She's gone. I hate myself. I miss her so much I want to scream." When I realized she'd seen them, I expected her to say something, anything, but she didn't. She just left another note. "You don't have to talk to me, but you don't have to be alone in this either." I wanted to rip it up, but I didn't. I folded it and put it in my drawer. Later that week, she asked if we could go for a walk. I refused. She left the house anyway, alone. I watched her from the upstairs window. She walked slowly, hands in her pockets, stopping to look at the trees. There was something unbearably sad about her solitude. She wasn't just being rejected. She was grieving too. But for what? Me, or the version of us she kept hoping for? I began hearing things in the house, not voices, more like memories, laughter that wasn't there, the clink of dishes that no one touched, my mother's humming from the hallway. Maybe I was going mad. Maybe madness was just grief that stayed too long. I found myself staring at my stepmother when she wasn't looking. Not with affection, with confusion. Why hadn't she left? Why stay in a house where every word felt like a minefield? Why keep trying when nothing changed? One night, I caught her looking at a photo of my mother again. She held it in both hands, eyes closed. She wasn't crying this time, just still, reverent. I watched from the stairs. She whispered something. I didn't catch the words. But I believed, in that moment, she wasn't asking for my place in her heart. She was asking my mother for permission, and suddenly, I hated myself for blaming her, for punishing her for not dying instead, for wanting her to be a villain just so my grief had somewhere to go. But I was still angry, and under the anger was a wound that refused to close. I didn't know how to love anymore. I only knew how to ache. Later that night, she knocked on my door again. Her voice was softer than usual. "Would you mind if I came in?" I didn't answer. She opened the door slowly. I didn't look at her. She sat on the edge of my bed, careful not to get too close. "I know you miss her," she said. Still, I didn't speak. "I miss someone, too," she added. I turned slightly. "Who?" "The version of you who smiled," she said. "The boy I've never really met, but I still believe is in there." The silence between us stretched thin. Then she did something I didn't expect. She placed a small sketchbook on my nightstand. "I bought this for you," she said, "in case you want a fresh start." Then she stood and left. I stared at it for hours. A blank book, no monsters, no twisted mothers, just empty pages, waiting. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it creeps like a shadow, silent, patient, clawing at everything you thought you'd let go of. But then, without warning, something tiny, something so small it shouldn't matter, ignites a fire that consumes you. For me, it was a photograph. The room had always been sacred. It was where I kept the remnants of her, my real mother. A pressed flower in a book she once read to me. Her favorite scarf, folded with almost religious care. And at the center of it all, perched on the corner of my desk like a shrine, her photo, unframed, slightly faded, corners curled. I liked it that way. It felt real, untouched by time, unprotected, just like the memory of her, raw. That morning, I returned home after school earlier than usual. The air was too quiet. Something felt off. I walked upstairs. My door was cracked open. That alone was enough to send a chill down my spine. I pushed it gently, and there she was, my stepmother. She was cleaning, dusting, folding things. At first, I said nothing. She hadn't noticed me yet. Then I saw it, the photo, gone from the desk. Panic rose in my chest. I scanned the room, eyes darting. Then I saw it again. But it wasn't the same. Now, it was tucked neatly into a new silver frame, encased behind a clean pane of glass, placed on the bookshelf like some decorative afterthought. My breath caught. My legs moved before I could think. "What are you doing?" She turned, startled, cloth still in her hand. I was just tidying up. Your room was so dusty, and I thought, "Why did you touch that?" I snapped, pointing at the photo. She looked confused for a moment. "The picture? I just thought it deserved something nicer. The frame. You had no right," I said, my voice rising. She took a small step forward, cautious. "I wasn't trying to. You don't get to decide how I remember her. I was just trying to protect it," she said, voice softer now. The corners were wearing down. I thought it might get ruined. "It was mine," I yelled. "It wasn't yours to touch. It wasn't yours to change." Her face shifted, hurt mingled with frustration. "I'm not trying to replace her," she said. "I never was. I was only trying to help you preserve something important. You think putting her behind glass preserves her?" "No," I spat. "You're just trying to make her easier to ignore, to put her away like she was some decoration." "That's not true," she said firmly. "You're twisting this." I stepped closer now, heat rising to my face. "You've already taken everything else. My house, my father's attention, every meal, every holiday. Now you want this too." She blinked at me. "I haven't taken anything. You've locked yourself away. You think grief gives you permission to punish everyone around you. Don't turn this on me," I said, fists clenched. "You don't know what it's like. You think you're the only one who's lost something?" she asked, her voice cracking. "You think I walk through this house every day pretending it's easy for me? I didn't ask for any of this. I'm just trying to hold the pieces together." I looked down at the framed photo. That glass suddenly felt like a wall between me and her, like someone had sealed my mother inside a museum case. Distant, unreachable. Something in me snapped. I lunged forward, Grabbed the frame. She moved toward me. Wait! But it was too late. I hurled it against the wall. Glass exploded. The frame split. The photo fluttered to the floor like a wounded bird. We both stood frozen. Shards sparkled across the carpet like angry stars. Her hand went to her mouth, but she didn't speak. Neither did I. The silence was louder than anything we just said. I knelt slowly, hands trembling. The picture was intact, but scratched now, the corner torn where the frame had bent it. I stared at her eyes, my mother's eyes in the photo. Eyes that had once looked at me with warmth. Now they looked through me, accusing, or maybe I imagined that. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't look at her. She crouched nearby, careful not to touch me. "I should have asked," she said. "I just wanted to make something better, and instead, I made it worse." My throat tightened. "I don't want better," I murmured. She blinked. "What?" "I want her. Not some protected memory, not a framed ghost. Just her." She nodded slowly. "I know." "No, you don't." She didn't argue, just sat there beside me in the mess we both made. That night, I didn't eat. Neither did she. Dad came home and sensed the tension, but said nothing, like always. He'd become a ghost of a man, floating through rooms, avoiding eye contact. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the window panes. My hands still trembled. I hadn't cried. Not when I broke the frame. Not when I saw her torn face. Not even now. It was something worse than tears, like a scream being choked in my chest. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside my door, then a soft knock. I didn't answer. The door creaked open. She stepped in her hands, something wrapped in a towel. She walked slowly, placed it gently on my desk, and turned to leave. But before she stepped out, she said, "I had a copy of the photo made, just in case. This one's yours, without a frame." Then she was gone. I sat up, unwrapped the towel. There it was, her smile, untouched. No frame, no glass, just paper and memory. I didn't know whether to thank her or scream. Instead, I laid it on my chest as I lay back down. Let it rise and fall with my breath. I didn't sleep, but I also didn't feel as alone. In the days that followed, we didn't speak much, but she didn't avoid me. She cooked breakfast like usual, left space beside her on the couch when she watched TV, tidied around my door without stepping in again. It was like she was saying, "I'm still here. I haven't given up, even if you hate me." And I wanted to hate her, but the more she didn't retaliate, the harder it became. The angrier I got, the more I hated myself instead. I started drawing again, but this time, not monsters. I drew her, my mother, from memory. Her holding a book, her laughing, her hugging me on my birthday. Each sketch softer than the last. No twisted limbs, no screaming mouths, just her. I didn't show them to anyone, but I left the notebook half open on the desk one night. The next day, it was still there, untouched. But beside it, a sticky note. "She looks like she loved you deeply. No name, no signature, just acknowledgement." Maybe that's what healing looks like. Not forgiveness, not closure, just acknowledgement. That something mattered, that someone mattered, and that even in conflict, love can whisper through the cracks. Even when memories get torn, even when frames shatter, even when words cut deep, what's real still remains. The rain started in the late afternoon. Not a gentle drizzle, but a downpour. Thick sheets of water slapping the windows like the sky was trying to wash something away. The light in the house dimmed, even with the lamps on, and every corner felt heavier, quieter. I was home alone, or so I thought. I had been searching for something, Not something specific, just something. I didn't know what pulled me toward the attic. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that familiar itch beneath the skin, the one that rises when silence grows too loud. Or maybe it was that I hadn't seen the photo in days, the one she gave me without a frame, wrapped in a towel. I didn't remember moving it. I hadn't touched it, but now it was gone from my desk. Again. The attic door was slightly ajar. That was unusual. I climbed the creaking steps, ducking under cobwebs in the slanted ceiling. The air was musty and cold, the kind of cold that didn't come from weather, but from time. I moved boxes, lifted lids, sifted through the forgotten things of a life that wasn't mine. Then, beneath a pile of winter coats and an old music box, I found it, my mother's picture, again. But this time, it was inside a small wooden box, taped shut, labeled spring cleaning. The handwriting wasn't mine. A pulse of heat surged in my chest. She'd hidden it, again, wrapped my mother in cardboard, boxed her up like a seasonal decoration. I didn't think, I didn't breathe. I just moved. She was downstairs when I stormed in, the box in my hands like evidence from a crime scene. She looked up from folding laundry, surprised, then worried. "What's wrong?" I didn't answer. I ripped the tape off and pulled out the photo. "You said it was mine," I said. "You said you wouldn't touch it." She stood slowly, sensing the storm in my voice. "I didn't throw it away," she said. I was cleaning and you decided again for me. You keep doing that." "I didn't mean to hide it. You think she's clutter? Something to pack up and forget?" "That's not true," she said, stepping forward. I stepped back. Her voice softened. "I'm not your enemy." "Yes, you are," I said, barely above a whisper. The words hurt my own throat, but they were out, and I couldn't take them back. She froze, her face twisted, not in anger, but in pain. And then something in her shifted. "I've tried," she said, voice trembling. "I've tried for years, but you never let me in. Not once. You were never supposed to be here," I said. She's gone," she said firmly. "And I'm still here." I took a step forward. "Then maybe you shouldn't be." I don't remember exactly how it started. A hand reaching for the photo, a tug of war, a desperate attempt to protect a memory, or maybe to reclaim it. Her hand on the frame, my hand gripping tighter. "Let go," she said. "No," I growled. Then it happened. Her foot missed the edge of the stair. Time fractured. The box dropped. The photo slipped from our grip. Her body twisted. One step, then another. Then nothing but air. Then sound. The thud was sickening, like a sack of potatoes, but louder, sharper, the kind of sound that echoes in your bones. I stood frozen at the top of the staircase. She lay at the bottom, motionless. "Mom," the word escaped me, not her name. Mom. Instinct. Regret. Something primal. "Mom," I ran down. Her eyes were open but not blinking. Her mouth was slightly parted. A tiny stream of blood ran from the side of her forehead, dark against the pale skin. I dropped to my knees beside her. My hands hovered over her, unsure where to touch, afraid that contact would make it real. "Please," I whispered. "Please get up." No answer. I shook her gently, then harder. "Please, I didn't mean..." Stillness. I pressed my ear to her chest. Nothing. I tried to remember CPR. Hands. Pressure. Air. Count. But my hands were shaking too hard. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. I tried again. "Wake up," I begged. Rain bled through the open door at the end of the hallway. Thunder cracked. I screamed. louder than I ever had in my life. A scream not meant for anyone, but for the universe itself, as if sheer noise could pull her back. I don't remember how long I sat there. I don't remember if I called anyone. All I remember is the feeling of her body going cold, of her eyes never blinking, of the photo lying face down on the hardwood floor, smeared with a drop of blood that wasn't hers. When my father arrived home, he didn't ask what happened. He didn't even shout. He just sank to the floor beside her, put his hand over hers, and wept. The police came later. They asked questions. I gave answers. Not lies, but not full truths either. It was an accident, I said, and it was. But it wasn't clean. It wasn't pure. It was born from something that had been festering for years. Anger, resentment, guilt, and underneath it all, a longing so raw it could cut through anything, even love. I didn't go to her funeral. I couldn't. I watched from the upstairs window as they lowered the casket. Rain again. Always rain, like the sky was mourning for me, or with me. In the weeks that followed, the house went quiet. No more warmth in the kitchen. No humming while folding laundry. No knock on my door with food I didn't ask for. Just silence, and footsteps that didn't come. I kept the photo, the same one, blood-stained corner and all. I didn't clean it, didn't frame it, just set it back on my desk. Let it stare at me. Let her stare at me. Both of them. Some nights, I thought I heard her voice, calling my name from the staircase, not angry, just soft, as if forgiving me. I never answered. I didn't know if I deserved to. They say losing someone changes you. But what they don't say is that losing someone again, because of you, unravels everything. It strips you of childhood, of forgiveness, of even the smallest comfort. It replaces it with a constant hum beneath your skin, a presence you can't escape, not guilt, not grief, something worse, knowing that you can't go back. And this time, you caused it. There was no siren when they came for me. Just a knock on the door, firm, emotionless, the kind that doesn't wait for an answer. I was still sitting on the bottom step of the staircase when the officers entered. One of them gently touched my shoulder, but I didn't look up. I didn't speak. I just let them take me. The juvenile detention center didn't feel like punishment at first. It felt like a pause. A place where time slowed down just enough to make you think, and keep thinking. The walls were a pale, institutional gray, the kind that swallowed sunlight and spat it out cold. The other kids whispered when I arrived. Some stared. One asked what I did. I didn't answer. I hadn't spoken since that day. Not to the officers, not to my father, not to the lawyer, not even to the psychologist who sat across from me twice a week, clipboard in hand, eyes soft and searching. The silence became a shield. No one could twist my words if I didn't give them any. And besides, what was left to say? They already knew the facts. She fell. She died. I was there. What they didn't know, what I refused to let them know, was the weight of everything behind it. The why was mine alone, and it was heavy. The trial came a month later. It wasn't a real courtroom, just a sterile room with folding chairs and bored faces. There was a judge, a lawyer who tried to speak for me, a prosecutor who didn't raise his voice, but didn't need to, and my father, he sat in the back, gray suit, wrinkled shirt, hands clenched together like he was holding on to something that kept slipping through his fingers. I never turned to look at him. I couldn't. They called it an accident. They said the intent wasn't clear, that I didn't mean to kill her. They used words like manslaughter and emotional trauma and history of grief. I used none. I said nothing. The judge asked if I had anything to say, if I wanted to speak, If I wanted to explain, I stared at the floor. I wasn't going to defend myself, because I agreed with them, with all of them, with every unspoken sentence in the room. I had killed her, not just her body, her kindness, her effort, her fragile, quiet attempts to be something soft in a house still sharp with memory. I had rejected her again and again, until there was no more rejection left to give. That night, back in my cell, I opened my journal, the one they allowed me to keep. I turned to a fresh page. With shaking fingers, I wrote, "I killed my mother, again." Then I underlined it. Once, twice. The ink smeared from the pressure of my grip, or maybe from the tear that landed right on the last word. From that moment, the journal became the only voice I allowed myself. I wrote to her, to both of them. My first mother, taken. My second, pushed. I told them things I never said when they were alive. I'm sorry. I was scared. I wanted you to stay. Every night, I pressed pen to paper and tried to bleed out what I couldn't cry. Sometimes the words came in floods. Other times, just one sentence. I miss you. I hate myself. Why did you leave me again? I began to write not to confess, but to remember. Her voice, her scent, the way she touched my hair when I was too sick to fight her kindness, the way she called me Khan, even when I never called her me. My father never visited, not once, and maybe that was for the best. I didn't know what I'd say if he did. Are you okay? No. Do you regret it? Too late. Do you hate me? I didn't know, but I hated myself enough for the both of us. One day, the psychologist slid a drawing across the table. A boy, a house, a woman at the door. Who is she? She asked. I didn't answer. She tried again. Do you feel like you locked her out? That you shut the door? I pushed the paper back without looking at it. She never brought drawings again. Outside the detention walls, the world kept moving. News headlines faded. Neighbors stopped whispering. Even memory dulled. But inside, in the small room with the flickering ceiling light, the weight didn't change. Guilt doesn't fade with time. It calcifies, becomes part of your bones. The guards started calling me the quiet one. Some of the other boys tried to provoke me. One said, "Heard you killed your mom twice. That true?" I didn't flinch. He didn't ask again. Silence was scarier than violence. There was no sentencing ceremony, no dramatic reading of fate, just paperwork and time. The system handed me a future I didn't want, but I accepted it because the one I did want was already buried. Weeks turned to months. I stopped counting. I didn't ask when I'd be released. Didn't care. My cell became a kind of cocoon, safe in its suffocating routine. Wake, eat, think, write, sleep, repeat. Sometimes I'd trace the letters of her name into my bedsheet with my finger, over and over, until the fabric grew warm. Other times, I'd just stare at the ceiling and try to forget what her voice sounded like, because remembering was worse. But one night, I dreamt of her, not the fall, not the blood, but a quiet kitchen. She was humming, the smell of rice and boiled chicken. She turned to me, smiled, and said, "It's okay, Khan." And I broke. In the dream, in the bed, all of me shattered. Because she never got to say those words. Because I never gave her a chance. I woke up drenched in sweat, clutching my chest. And that night, I wrote, "I wish I could go back. I wish I could answer. I wish I had called you Mom." They say trauma makes you grow up faster. But what they don't say is that it steals the very thing you grow into. Your voice, your hope, your ability to believe you can be forgiven. I still didn't speak, not to anyone, but through the journal, I screamed, I wept, I relived every second of the fall, every crack of bone, every heartbeat I didn't hear, until my words bled into the pages like confessions carved into stone. There were no visitors on my birthday, no cake, no candles, just a guard who tossed a stale sandwich onto my tray and muttered, "Another year," I wrote on the journal's corner. 17, still breathing, still guilty. The journal filled quickly after that, page after page of mourning, memory, and muted rage. It became my courtroom, my confessional, my prayer, and in that silence, I sentenced myself, every day, every hour, not with bars but with truth. Because when you kill someone you love, twice, you don't need a judge. You carry the verdict in your chest. I stopped writing on a Thursday. There was no reason for the choice, no date to commemorate, no voice that told me to do it. I simply woke up, stared at the blank page in my journal, and realized I had nothing left to say. Not because I was healed, but because I had said it all. Every apology, every scream, every desperate sentence that clawed at the past like fingernails on concrete. The journal was full now, its spine cracked and its corners worn from nights of restless hands. So I closed it, slid it under the mattress, and waited. A year had passed inside the concrete cage. Time blurred into routine. My voice, once a silent protest, had become a kind of ghost inside me, a fading echo. Even the guards stopped trying. No more therapy sessions, no more questions, only glances, pitying ones, or fearful ones, as if they saw something in me they couldn't name, something unraveling. The dreams had changed. They no longer showed the fall, the blood, the screaming. Instead, they offered quiet, a kitchen without sound, a birthday cake with no candles, a woman with her back turned, my mother, standing at the edge of a hallway that stretched longer than any place I'd ever known. I called her name over and over, but she didn't turn, didn't flinch, just kept walking away until she vanished into the black. The first time I had that dream, I woke up gasping, sweat cold on my neck. But the third time, I didn't move, just lay there, eyes open, staring into the darkness, waiting for the nothing to settle again, because I finally understood. Even in my dreams, I was unforgiven. They didn't notice when I started asking for rope. They thought it was for laundry, or maybe some kind of art project. Kids in here asked for stranger things, and I had never been violent, at least, not since her. So they gave it to me, a length of braided nylon, coarse and clean. I tucked it beneath my pillow like a secret and waited. It rained that night, soft, steady, the kind of rain that might have once made me nostalgic, a whisper of warm kitchens and window panes, but not anymore. Now it just sounded like silence breaking apart. There was no note, no speech, just a chair, a beam, and a final act. The rope was cold in my hands, colder than I expected. But maybe that was fitting. Maybe endings should be cold. As I stepped onto the chair, my heart didn't race. It slowed, like it had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. There was no fear, no last-second regret, only stillness, a quiet acceptance, not of death, but of the truth that I had never left that staircase. Not really. Part of me had died with her, and the rest was just catching up. The moment I kicked the chair away, I saw her, not the way she died, not the blood, but her face, calm, soft. She looked at me, finally, and opened her mouth as if to say something, but no sound came out. Just the faintest curl of sadness at the corner of her lips. Then, she turned her back and disappeared into light. I fell into darkness, but didn't land. There is a moment between life and death, A breathless space where everything becomes unbound. Time, memory, regret, all of it floats, like ash in slow motion. I woke up lying on a floor that wasn't concrete. It wasn't a floor at all. It was glass, endless, black, and cold beneath my skin. Above me, a sky with no stars, just a swirling mass of pale light that moved like clouds made of breath. My body felt weightless, and yet, I was still there. Was this death, hell, a dream? I sat up slowly, my joints moving as if submerged in thick water. In front of me stood a hallway, familiar, but not. It looked like the one in my dream, the one my mother disappeared into. Only now, it pulsed faintly with a dull red glow, like a heart beating behind walls. I heard footsteps, but they weren't mine. They came from behind. I turned and saw her. Not my first mother, not my stepmother, but both, standing side by side, watching, saying nothing. Their faces unreadable, but their eyes were hollow, not angry, not kind, just absent. I tried to speak, tried to say something, anything, but my voice cracked in the air like dust. No sound came out, just silence, thick and alive. Then the rope appeared again, hanging above me, suspended from nothing. A noose, swaying gently, invitingly. Beneath it, a mirror, but not one that showed my face. It showed a boy, 10 years old, cake smeared on his cheek, eyes wide with joy, before the sirens came, before the blood, before everything broke. The mirror cracked, and the boy was gone. I looked down at my hands. They were stained with ink, the kind that seeps from journals and never dries. I touched my chest, felt nothing, not a heartbeat, not warmth. Only a hollow thump, like knocking on a coffin from the inside. I understood then, I was not in heaven, nor in hell. I was inside myself, a place built from grief, from guilt, from every word I couldn't say out loud, and I had brought the rope with me. The hallway called again. I stepped forward, barefoot on the glass. Each footstep echoed like a name. Khan, Khan, Khan. But no one answered. At the end of the hallway was a door, red, faded, the kind you'd find in old houses, paint peeling, wood swollen with time. I reached for the knob, but before I touched it, I heard her voice, not the one I imagined, not a dream, real. Mi chua bao giokwe lung voi kon. And then, darkness. I awoke, not in a cell, not in the afterlife, but in something else entirely, somewhere in between. The rope was gone, but the bruise remained, faint and cold around my neck. I could still feel the glass beneath my feet, still see the hallway when I closed my eyes. I had crossed a threshold, but not the one I intended. Not death, but something worse, or maybe something waiting. Some part of me had died, but another had awakened, one that could no longer hide behind silence, because in this strange twilight between life and what lies beyond, the dead begin to speak. And now, it was my turn to listen. I floated, not up, not down, just outward. The glass beneath me had vanished, and the hallway dissolved behind my back like smoke retreating into the void. In its place was a space so vast it defied language. No walls and no ceiling, no sound. And yet, everything felt loud. Not loud in a way that hurts the ears, but in a way that presses against your chest, like silence with weight. There was no time here, no beginning or end, only emotion, distilled and raw, suspended like dust in a shaft of light that never moved. I could no longer tell if I had a body. When I looked down, there was form, but it shimmered, rippled, fractured like a reflection on unsettled water. Sometimes, I saw myself as I was. Other times, I saw versions of me that weren't quite right. One with eyes hollowed out, one dressed in prison gray, face blank and mouth stitched shut, another with blood on his hands, fresh, glistening, staring directly at me as if he blamed me for something I hadn't yet done. Or maybe I had. Maybe we all had. Where am I? I asked the space around me. But it didn't echo. It absorbed the question like it was always hungry, always listening, but never answering. Then came the light, not from above, but from within. The first version of me stepped forward, formed out of smoke and memory. A child, 10 years old, holding a slice of birthday cake that never melted. His smile was frozen, too wide, too sweet. And when he spoke, his voice was mine, but thinner, brighter, tinged with the innocence I had long since buried. If only you'd kept smiling. Next came another boy, older, maybe 13. This one held a paintbrush dripping with black. His clothes were torn, knuckles bruised, face streaked with tears that had dried long ago. He didn't smile. He didn't look up, just whispered as he walked past. If only you had let her in. The third was nearly grown, 17, pale, tired. He carried a mirror, not to look at himself, but to hold up to me, so I could see. If only you hadn't picked up the rope. They circled around me. Versions of me formed from shattered choices, each a path not taken, or worse, a path I did take but chose to forget. Some were angry, some mournful, some stared like strangers with my face. Each was a shard of something deeper. Each was me, and none of them could be undone. I tried to walk, but every step I took folded the space beneath me. The world warped and shifted, from a burning staircase to a cold prison cell, to a room filled with photographs turned face down. None of it stayed still, because nothing in this place ever did. A version of me screamed, not with voice, but with presence. He was the one with clenched fists, the one who punched holes in walls when no one was looking, the one who tore up paintings before anyone could see them. His eyes were red, burning not from tears, but from the fire he held inside. He lunged at me. I braced, but he passed right through, like smoke, like guilt. I fell to my knees, though I wasn't sure if I had knees here. Maybe just the shape of regret. Then came her voice, not the one that left me, not the one that fell down the stairs, but another. You've seen the echoes, she said. And suddenly, the versions of me faded into mist, all except one, a boy, barely 12, sitting cross-legged with a photo in his lap. The photo was cracked, not from age, but from a small, deliberate tear right through the center. I knew the image well. My mother, her smile, her eyes, and now, a wound right through her face. I knelt beside him. He didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge me, just whispered to the photo as if she could hear. I'm sorry I couldn't keep you. I'm sorry I let you be replaced. I'm sorry I didn't stop it. I reached for his shoulder, but before I could touch him, I became him. I was back in the living room, the one with the beige wallpaper, the ticking clock that always ran 10 minutes slow. My stepmother was standing in the doorway, holding a vacuum and smiling gently, too gently. Do you want me to make your favorite soup tonight? She asked, like it was the easiest thing in the world. But I wasn't ready. I couldn't forgive yet. I didn't know how. I screamed, threw the picture frame against the wall. Glass shattered, and so did I. Then I blinked, and I was back in the void, the space between. Something had shifted. I looked down, and the glass returned beneath my feet. But now, it was cracked. Thin, delicate veins running like lightning beneath the surface. Each crack glowed faintly with memory. My mother's hands lighting birthday candles, the sound of her humming while folding laundry, her final look right before the accident. Each fragment whispered, "What if you'd done it differently? What if you just let go? What if this is all your fault?" I dropped to my knees. "Enough," I cried. "I know what I've done." But the void didn't respond. It never did. Then, a shape approached. Faint at first, not one of my echoes, not a punishment, but something else. A boy, not me. He was small, maybe 6, wearing pajamas with stars on them, and he held a candle that burned without smoke. He looked up at me with wide eyes. "You forgot something," he said. I blinked. "What?" "Hope." He offered me the candle. And for the first time in what felt like centuries, I felt warmth. Not forgiveness, not yet, but warmth. Enough to stand again, enough to breathe. As I held the candle, the cracks in the glass pulsed and shifted. The reflections changed. No longer tragedies, but possibilities. A world where I spoke instead of staying silent. A version of me that hugged her back. A path where the rope was never tied. I didn't know if those paths could ever be mine. But here, in this space between two worlds, I saw them. And that was the beginning of something. The candle grew brighter, and the void grew softer. I looked down at the child beside me. He smiled, not the too wide grin of denial, but the gentle curve of beginning again. "You're not done," he said. "You're just broken, and broken things can still hold light." Then he vanished. The void cracked open, and I fell, not into death, not into life, but into the next part of the story. At first, I thought it was simply a wall, smooth, unbroken, and pulsing faintly in the endless twilight of this in-between place. But then I moved, and it moved with me. Not a reflection exactly, but a presence. A great monolithic mirror that shimmered like the surface of a still lake, beckoning me without sound, without gesture. I approached cautiously, unsure if I would see myself again, or another version of me waiting to accuse. Instead, the mirror remained still, quiet, until I whispered, "Show me." Then it opened, not like a door, more like a memory peeling open. And suddenly, I was no longer standing before the glass, but inside it, watching, living, feeling. I was small again, hiding behind the living room couch. The sound of my father's voice filtered through the air, like smoke from a slow-burning fire. "Just give it time," he said gently. "He's not ready, but he will be." The voice that answered shook with exhaustion and tenderness. "I know," she said. I keep hoping one day he'll call me Mom. Just once. Just to see if he can." It was her, my stepmother. Her voice cracked around the edges like glass weathered by years of cold. Then, silence, except for the tiniest sound. The sound of her wiping away a tear quickly, so no one would notice. So I wouldn't notice. But I had. Even back then, I just didn't want to see it. The mirror shifted, time bent, collapsed, reformed. Now I stood in the hallway, the day she placed the photograph of my real mother in the glass frame. I had thought it an act of theft, a cruel erasure, but through her eyes it was something else entirely. She looked at the photo, touched it gently, and whispered, "You were here first. He loved you first. I know that. I just want him to know that I see you too." Then she placed the photo on the shelf, carefully, reverently, not hiding it, but giving it a place of honor. I collapsed to my knees. A shame I didn't know how to carry flooded my chest like black water. All those years I'd accused her, silently, violently, when in truth, she had never tried to replace my mother. She only ever tried to protect what I held sacred. Even when I spat back at her, even when I shattered everything she tried to build, the mirror shifted again. Now it was my father. He stood in the garage, eyes distant, hands gripping a steering wheel that no longer turned. The car was off, but his thoughts raced. "I should have been the one who died," he whispered. "Not her." His hand trembled as he pressed it against the cold leather. I let my son see it all. God forgive me. He saw her go, and I couldn't stop it. I should have... He choked on his breath. Not the kind of sob that bursts forth, but the kind that's swallowed back down, over and over, until it becomes a knot no blade can cut through. And just like that, I saw the truth. My father hadn't abandoned me in his silence. He was drowning in his own guilt. He didn't know how to comfort me because he didn't know how to forgive himself. We were both ghosts of the same tragedy, haunting the same house from opposite ends. Then came the most painful reflection, the one I never expected the mirror to grant me. Her, my mother, my real mother, the one whose scent I still remembered on rainy mornings, the one whose laugh had once been the safest sound in the world. She was sitting in the kitchen, the birthday cake half frosted, her hands dusted with sugar, but her face was troubled. "He's so much like his father," she said aloud, almost to herself. "Strong, quiet, too quiet," then softer. "Sometimes I wonder if he'll ever really talk to me." Her hand paused mid-frost. "I'm afraid I've passed the sadness to him, like a secret I didn't mean to share." I cried. I wept in the mirror, beside the mirror, inside the mirror. Tears not just for what I had lost, but for all I had never understood. I had been a child living in a house of hearts breaking quietly, and I thought my pain was the only pain that mattered. But now I saw it clearly. Everyone was hurting. Everyone was doing the best they could, even when they failed, even when they broke. The mirror grew dim, the reflections dissolved, but something remained, a single pulsing light, not from the mirror, but from within me. I clutched my chest, half expecting to find a wound, but instead, I felt warmth, a strange, heavy warmth, regret, but not the kind that consumes, the kind that teaches. I spoke softly into the fading glass. "I'm sorry I never saw you, any of you." There was no reply, no whisper from beyond, just my own reflection now, pale, tired, tear-streaked, but no longer hollow. I looked at myself, truly looked, and for the first time, I didn't flinch, because now I understood. The mirror did not exist to punish, it existed to reveal. And what it revealed was this: I had been blind not from cruelty, but from fear. Fear of losing what I loved, fear of letting someone new in, fear of replacing her. But love isn't a replacement. Love is a bridge, and I had burned every one of mine. But bridges can be rebuilt, even in places like this, even with hands like mine. The mirror faded, not shattered, not broken, just done, its purpose fulfilled, and behind it, a doorway, or maybe a path, lit faintly by something I had almost forgotten: hope. I stepped forward, and for the first time in forever, I didn't look back. The path beyond the mirror was unlike anything I had known, neither solid nor air, neither dark nor bright. It pulsed with something deeper than memory, longing, mine, hers, ours. Each step forward felt like shedding a skin I had outgrown, layers of guilt, fear, and silence falling away like ash in the windless air. There was no time here, only presence. And in that presence, she came. She didn't appear with fanfare, no blinding light, no angelic choir, no thunderclap or storm, just a warmth, a scent, honey, lemon, rain-soaked cotton. And then she stood before me, not as I last remembered her, bloodied and still at the side of the road, but whole, wearing the dress she always saved for birthdays, barefoot, radiant. Her eyes were no longer just her eyes. They were the sum of every lullaby, every tear, every dream left unspoken. They were the sky after a storm, and when she smiled, I couldn't breathe. We stood in silence. For a moment that felt like every childhood memory folding into one. Then finally, her voice, "You've come so far, my little one." My throat tightened. No words, not yet. Just the sound of my own breathing, trembling, hollow, desperate. She stepped closer. Her feet didn't touch the ground. Yet I felt the earth respond to her presence, like everything knew. This was the moment I had chased through every dream. Every night I cried alone in bed. Every morning I woke hoping the accident was just a nightmare. This was her. This was Mom. She opened her arms, but I couldn't move. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But something inside me pulled back, as if unworthy of her touch. She saw it. She always did. Gently. She asked, "Why are you still afraid?" And I broke. "Because I let you die." The words spilled out like oil from a cracked heart. "I was there. I saw you. I didn't move. I didn't scream in time. I froze. I let it happen." She listened. No interruptions. No pity, no disbelief. Just her hand reaching for mine. Soft, steady, warm. "You were a child," she said, voice low. "You didn't let it happen. Life did." I shook my head. "But I forgot you. I hated her. I destroyed everything. I let it all turn to poison." "You were hurting," she whispered. "I said I hated you. In my head. So many times." Her eyes didn't waver. No tears. Just truth. "I know. A part of me wanted you gone, so I wouldn't hurt anymore. And then, do you hate me for that?" Silence. Then, a single step. She placed her hand on my cheek. "Sweetheart, I never needed you to be perfect, just to be real." And she asked, so softly it felt like a thread of wind across my skin, "Do you love me?" I couldn't speak, because the truth was a knot too tangled for words. But I nodded, over and over, like a child again, desperate to be understood. "I always have," I managed to whisper. "Even when I forgot, even when I tried to replace the pain with anger. Even then, especially then." She pulled me into her arms, and the world changed. There are no words for what that embrace felt like, but I'll try. It was the warmth of every nightlight she ever left on when I was scared, the softness of her lullabies when I couldn't sleep, the fierce love in her voice when she said, "No matter what happens, I will always be your mother." It was the truth, not spoken, not explained, felt, carried in bone and blood and breath. I sobbed against her shoulder, and she didn't shush me, didn't tell me to be strong. She just held me, like time had rewound, like I was 5 again, and the monsters were only shadows on the wall, and she was the light that made them vanish. Then came the light, not from above, not from her, but from within me. It began in the center of my chest, a soft, golden flicker. Her arms never left me, but somehow I knew she was letting go, not out of rejection, but release. She stepped back, eyes glistening, and said, "It's time." Time for what? To carry the love, not the guilt. I wanted to scream no, to hold on and never let her go again. But deep down, I knew this wasn't goodbye, not really, not forever. It was a door opening, one I had spent years afraid to walk through. She smiled, and I saw no pain, no sadness, only peace. As she faded into the growing light, Her final words reached me like a breeze on a quiet lake. You were never alone. Even in the silence, even in the dark, I've always been with you. And just like that, she was gone. But something stayed. Her warmth, her voice in my chest. A weight lifted, not replaced, but transformed. I was still broken, but now I was healing. When I opened my eyes again, the space around me had changed. No longer the murky half-realm of pain and memory, but something brighter, softer. I looked down at my hands and they glowed faintly, and I understood. For the first time since the night of her death, I had forgiven myself, because she had forgiven me first. When the light from Mother's embrace faded, it did not vanish. It shifted, from gold to silver, from warmth to clarity. The world around me melted like wax, soft shapes returning to form, lines sharpening into focus. But instead of stepping forward, I was pulled inward, as if the journey now required not more movement, but confrontation. The mirror returned, this time not as a memory or illusion. It stood before me like a gate, tall and arched, forged from something colder than glass, as if reflection itself had become solid. But the strangest part, I couldn't see my own face, only fog, moving and murmuring behind the surface, as if something else waited within, something breathing, something watching. Then the fog cleared, and I saw him. At first, I thought it was me. Same eyes, same hair, same scars, but different, colder, paler. The skin drawn tight like a canvas stretched too far, the lips curved in a way I had never seen in myself. Not sadness, but contempt. Eyes like shards of obsidian, dead, yet burning with a hatred too old for any child. This was not a reflection. This was a version of me, the version that never found the light. So, the stranger said, voice echoing like steel on glass, you finally crawled your way here. I said nothing. He stepped forward. The mirror did not stop him. He passed through, a shadow torn loose from its anchor. Do you know who I am? He asked. I nodded. You're who I could have become. He grinned. It wasn't a smile. It was a wound. I am what you buried, what you denied. I am every scream you swallowed, every fist you didn't throw, but wanted to. His breath was frost. I am the one who never forgave. He circled me, slow and patient, like a vulture studying its own corpse. You clung to guilt like it made you noble. But guilt without hatred, that's weakness. You should have burned them. Your stepmother, your father, this entire broken world. They made you this. He stopped in front of me, face inches from mine. They made me. For a moment, I was silent, because part of me, deep, buried, bitter, agreed. There were nights I wished them pain. There were days I wanted to scream, to destroy, to watch the world pay. But I remembered something else. My mother's arms, the warmth, the light, her voice. Carry love, not guilt. And I answered, no one made you. I did. His grin faltered. What? You're not a ghost, not a curse. You're the part of me I fed when I stopped listening to love. His eyes narrowed. Don't you dare pretend you're better than me. I'm not, I said quietly, but I'm done running from you. I stepped forward, and the ground between us trembled. You think forgiveness will save you? He hissed. It's a lie. Forgiveness is forgetting. It's surrender. No, I said. Forgiveness is remembering without letting it poison you. His hands clenched. The air darkened. I kept you alive when no one else cared. I gave you fire when you were drowning. And I thank you, I whispered. What? You were my armor, my anger, my defiance. But I don't need you anymore. I opened my arms, not in battle, but in peace. You don't have to keep hurting. Not even you. The stranger staggered back. His skin flickered, cracks of light spilling through him. "Stop!" he gasped. "I forgive you." And then he screamed. But it wasn't rage. It was release, like a dam breaking from within. The shadows poured out of him, not as monsters, but memories. The birthday that ended in blood, the photo in the glass frame, the fall down the stairs, the silence of the courtroom, the rope, and then light. He fell to his knees, and in that moment I saw him, not as a demon, not as a reflection, but as a child. Me, curled in pain, crying without sound. I knelt and held him. His body flickered, becoming translucent. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know. I was just scared. So was I." And with those words, he vanished. No scream, no explosion, just peace. The mirror cracked, but instead of shattering, it dissolved into mist, and behind it, a horizon, golden, vast, endless. I stood in the empty space he left behind, and for the first time, I felt whole. Not because the darkness was gone, but because I had faced it, held it, and let it go. We are not only the choices we make, but the ones we forgive ourselves for not making. I thought redemption would be the end, but some stories do not close like a book. They become echoes, and I, who once fell from grace, now choose to fall into dreams, not for escape, but for purpose. I did not walk into the light. I walked into the dark, where other children wept. They don't see me, not really, but in their sleep, when the world softens, when the weight of pain slips into shadows, they hear a voice, a whisper, gentle, familiar. You are not alone. That's me. The boy whose mother died in the fire still wakes screaming. But last night, he dreamed of a field full of lanterns, and someone took his hand. The girl whose father never came home now dreams of stars, where a voice reads her stories in the language of light. The orphan, the abandoned, the brokenhearted, they all dream. And in their dreams, I walk softly. I don't offer miracles, only presence, only peace. I no longer carry my name, only the stories I've collected. They move through me like rivers, small voices speaking through a body made of memory and mercy. I am not a savior. I am a storyteller, a keeper of shattered souls. They call me different names: the night boy, the lantern child, the ghost with warm eyes. But I am not ghost. I am not God. I am what remains when grief chooses to become grace. Sometimes I sit beside a child too afraid to sleep. Their eyes flicker under closed lids, and in the hush between breaths, I begin. Once, there was a boy who thought he had ruined everything, and I tell them my story, not the horrors, not the rope, but the healing, the gnarled path, the mirror, the mother's arms, the forgiveness that grew where guilt once bled. They rarely remember the words when they wake, but something stays, a warmth, a whisper, a dream of being loved by something they can't name, and that is enough. I walk through worlds stitched from sleep, forests of forgotten songs, oceans of tears frozen in time, castles built by lonely imaginations, and in every place, there's a child waiting to be heard. Do you believe dreams can save us? I do, because it was in a dream that I was saved, not by angels, not by miracles, but by understanding. And now, that is what I carry, from child to child, night to night. Sometimes, I hear the voice of my mother again, not calling me back, not asking me to leave, just watching, proud, present, and sometimes I see him, the boy I used to be. He walks beside me, silent but smiling, his eyes no longer hollow, because we are whole, because we are useful, because every nightmare I enter becomes a little softer. Every silence I break becomes a small salvation. There is no heaven for me, no hell, only this eternal in-between, and I would not trade it. Because what better place is there for a broken boy who found his purpose in mending the dreams of others? Some nights, the wind carries my voice further. To you, maybe, to someone who reads these words, or feels them in the hush before sleep. And if you do, listen carefully. The voice in the dark is not a monster. It is not fear. It is me. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not your pain. I do not ask to be remembered, only felt, in the way a soft light is felt behind closed eyes, in the way a story lingers even after it ends. That is my gift now. That is my penance. That is my peace. Because once I was lost in sorrow, and now I lead others home. Time in this place bends like water, and tonight it bends backward, not as punishment, but as a gift. I find myself once again at the moment everything began. The birthday, my 10th, but it feels different this time. The air isn't heavy with dread. The lights don't flicker with forewarning. The cake sits patiently, its candles unlit, waiting, and in the kitchen, she stands, my mother, whole, alive, smiling. This is not a trick, not a cruel repetition. This is grace, the dream before the dream, the place where memory is no longer a trap, but a doorway. I remember this moment, how I once ran, how my laughter echoed down the hall, oblivious to the tragedy waiting just outside. But tonight, I do not run. I stay. I let the moment unfold without fear. My mother turns. She looks at me, and instead of telling me to wash my hands or sit still, she just smiles. There you are, she says. I was waiting. Her voice is the same, but softer now. Like wind through curtains, I walk to her, not as a frightened boy, but as the soul I've become. And still, she sees me, all of me, even the darkness, even the parts I was afraid to show. We don't speak of death. We don't need to, because this moment isn't about what happened. It's about what could have been. It's about what still matters. She lights the candles, one by one. I notice her hands gentle, steady. The flame dances in her eyes. Make a wish, she says, and for the first time in forever, I don't wish for anything to change. I just close my eyes and wish to forgive myself. Not because I didn't make mistakes, but because it's time. When I open my eyes, she's looking at me. You've carried so much, she whispers, but none of it made me love you less. The tears come quietly, not like a flood, not like sorrow, like a release, like breath after holding it too long. She touches my face, a single moment, a single hand. You've done enough, she says. You can let go now. And just like that, the chains fall, not with a clang, but with silence. I blink, and we're outside. The sun is setting. The wind smells like cake and dust and warm air. She holds my hand. We walk across the yard, barefoot, unhurried. What happens now, I ask. She smiles again. That's up to you. I look behind me. The house, the window I once stared through, the stairs where everything changed, the boy I used to be, all still there, but no longer holding me. Memory no longer a prison, regret no longer a sentence. Just story, and story, when forgiven, becomes something new, a seed, a beginning. She releases my hand. I expect her to vanish, but she doesn't. She just steps back, watching, present, peaceful. I take one step forward, then another. Each footfall feels lighter. like I'm not walking away, but walking towards something. Something real, something mine. The sky begins to shimmer. The world starts to dissolve, not disappear, just open, like a curtain pulled back on a new stage. And then I hear it, soft, steady, the voice of a child, calling, a nightmare forming somewhere far away, a heart breaking quietly in the dark. It's time. I know what I have to do. I smile at my mother one last time, and she nods. Not goodbye, but go. Tell them, she says. Tell them the story. So I do. I step into the next dream, not as the boy who broke, but as the soul who rebuilt. Not as punishment, but as purpose. And in the darkness, as another child begins to cry, they hear a voice, steady, kind, familiar. Once there was a boy, and this time memory is not a chain, it is a light. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.